If you are waiting for your governments to make the changes, you will be waiting many, many lifetimes.
We have all of these amazing people in places of power that are doing nothing.
The earth is alive, and every step we take must be with love and caution.
And we can together create important global movements.
We the world.
We the world.
We the world.
We the world.
We the world. We the people.
One of the articles we had in this issue that dealt with the critical times that we are all living with was entitled In Extremis. Its author is George Caponelli, and George is with us here this evening. Our other guest is Jana Larson, who's a critical member of the We campaign. She's a coordinator of our economic justice campaign and is very active and a major force in the Poor People's Campaign. So George Caponelli is an award-winning author, film and television producer, and director and sculptor, and co-founder of Age Nation, Ageless Living, and Empower New Mexico. So as I mentioned before, George's article did appear in the most latest issue of We, and it highlights the critical times that we currently live in. And that's especially very important given that today is election day. And we're all waiting to see what the results are and how it will affect us over the next many years. So George, thank you for coming on. And if you could just please, share with us some of the thoughts that you expressed in your article.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure to be with you. And it is an extraordinary day. I think that there are an increasing number of Americans over the last several months who have been more and more aware that perhaps the most important issue on the ballot is democracy itself. And the reason I selected the title In Extremis for the article and for a new book of the same name that I've written is that the term comes from the nautical language. In extremis advises the captain and crew of a ship that is in danger of capsizing, running aground, or colliding with another vessel, to abandon all of the traditional rules of the road by which ships navigate and do everything that is necessary and important to prevent the ship and its crew from coming to harm. And so it's been my contention that that's exactly what this election is for those of us in America. And that while we need to do all of the usual things as well, contribute, volunteer, support candidates of choice, support issues of consequence to us, we also have to recognize that we have to go even further than that, because the individuals who are currently doing their best to eliminate democracy in America are not playing games. They are extraordinarily well funded, they're extraordinarily well organized, and they're obsessively committed to turning democracy into either a corporatocracy or a kleptocracy. If those of you who are listening and watching don't know what a kleptocracy is, just look at Russia and you will see what a kleptocracy is and how the resources and the capacities and the talents and the energies of the people are all dedicated to the enrichment of a few at the top. So, so that's why I wrote In Extremis, and why I believe that we, the people, are literally democracy's best and last hope. And if we do today what we can do, that is, if we exercise our inalienable rights, and if we turn out in unprecedented numbers, if we see people being harassed and bothered at the polls, if we stand up and do things to protect their rights. And then after the election, if we ensure that all the votes are counted, if that all of the people's hearts and souls that have been cast today are accorded respect, then we have the capacity to drive these malignant misogynists off the field and regain some degree of control of our country.
I think most people finally started to realize what was going on with the election of Donald Trump, and well, the election of, but his assuming office and after the election of 2016. But yet what's been going on, this attempt to basically undermine our democracy, has been actually going on for decades. I think we could trace it back to the 50s and 60s, and just it's been a consistent movement, and they've steadily eroded our democracy without people, I think, fully realizing it.
Yeah, I think that movement in some ways has been going on since the arguments over the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and they have obviously broken out at various times. But it was in 1972 when Lewis Powell Jr., who had been nominated to the Supreme Court by Richard Nixon, was asked by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to write a kind of diatribe, an anti-communist, anti-New Deal diatribe, to encourage business in America to reclaim power over government, over the people, over law. So what's known as the Powell Memorandum was a blueprint that the conservative movement has used with obsessive commitment an enormous amount of money since 1972. And so when you hear about textbooks being banned and rewritten and local school boards being taken over and local radio stations and print media being purchased, all of that was part of the Powell Memorandum. And they've followed it with a diligence and cunning that is undeniable. They also had a 50-year plan to take over the federal court system, and they've now accomplished that. And while they did all of that, we went about our business thinking democracy was absolutely inviolable and that we could pay attention to a lot of other things, but they didn't. And what we're facing today is the result of that dedication and cunning commitment. And they want a white Christian nation. They want a nation where there's no separation of church and state. They want a nation where minorities don't have rights. And since most of us belong to one minority or another, that's a pretty large group, So this is serious stuff. And for those out there who have been fooled and bamboozled by the fact that gas has gone up $1 a gallon or whatever the hell it has, or we see corporations today having a field day with rape and pillage of the American citizen, raising prices that have no justification. And so people say, oh, it's the economy, or oh, it's this, or oh, it's that. No, it's not. It's democracy.
And of course, we're all very concerned what the results will be tonight, whether we will put a firewall up and sort of keep it under control. But on some level, there will be gains by the radical right. So it becomes even more important that we all become involved and take action. And and there are movements out there, there are people out there, there are many committed to fighting for our democracy. I think one of those movements is the Poor People's Movement. So we welcome Jana here with us today. Jana, do you want to speak a bit about what's currently going on with the Poor People's Movement?
So I joined the Poor People's Campaign a couple of years ago. Rick encouraged me to get involved, and then between their reaching out to me and my reaching out to them, it happened. And now I'm on the coordinating committee for Ohio's Northeast chapter of the Poor People's Campaign, which also makes me a member of the national coordinating committee. And so I can't say I'm at the upper level, but I'm up there enough to know what's going on. And anyway, regarding this campaign, Reverend Barber, William Barber, and Reverend Dr., well, they're both Reverend Doctors, Liz Theoharis from Repairers of the Breach, gave us a challenge to all the states. And we have 48 states who are participating with having chapters in their states for Poor People's Campaign. And the challenge was to reach out to 5 million low wealth and low propensity voters in swing states. So that would be Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, that I recall. We were all on, different using different contactless conversations, we called them. So we would get 300 at a time, push your button, send out 300, and then we would get the responses. And we had scripted responses that we could use. And that's all very easy and a lot less scary than going canvassing or phone banking, which I won't do. And it was amazing. And I've text banked before over the past couple of years for Poor People's Campaign regarding various causes. It was amazing, the nasty responses. So I had to wear my little headband here to remind me to stay thinking positive as I was working on this text banking, because it was not easy to do. At the very beginning, I got quite upset because people can just write stop. They don't have to come back with these, crudities, crude remarks, and just horrid responses. And the amount of anger that's out there and or apathy, and definitely lack of information, credible information, is really quite appalling. You can't react, you can't engage. And sometimes the best you can do is just push the opt-out button, archive it, and go on. But we reached our goal. In fact, I think we got up to 6 million. And towards the end, we were reaching out again to the people who didn't opt out. So they got us again. And there were a lot of other campaigns that were working on the same thing. I did volunteer with a couple other campaigns to reach out to the young voters and to Mobilize and Gen X or Gen Z, I forget what. But, we have to get them out. We're trying to give voice to the voiceless and to the marginalized. And even so, just how could my reaction is, how can anyone think that the Democrats are the bad ones? Because and maybe I'm stepping on toes here, but I don't see the Democrats as a whole, as a party, saying that if they don't win, they're going to challenge the results and say that the election was rigged. I don't see that kind of like mobilizing people to go out and prevent people from voting or intimidating them or causing any kind of violence. So I guess text banking and their responses is on my mind, because I've been doing it for over a month now, and it's just like, I'm kind of like, wow, I haven't text banked today. It's like, I have some free time now.
Did you find that you got that you did receive any positive responses?
Yes, but you know, out of that 119,000, I would say I got around 5. And there was even one that I will always remember. It was a young lady who, it was her first time voting, and she was happy and excited about it. And of course, I didn't have a scripted response to respond with, but maybe she'll remember it. And I just said, "Wow, I'm so proud of you. You're being a good. That's what a good citizen does." And but mostly it was just if there was any response other than stop, it was nasty, very nasty.
But you did. But the good news is that you reached out to people, encouraging people to vote, and we're hoping to see a high turnout, because with a higher turnout, the results tend to be more pro towards democracy.
That's the hope.
We saw that in I think in 2020.
We were very nonpartisan too, so you know, we definitely had that reaction. We just want people to vote. Of course, there's that attitude towards poor people, you know, that people are poor because they're lazy, people are poor because they're stupid, people are poor because they don't want to work, and which is probably true in some cases, but it's just another example of that myth of poverty, and that infuriates me. So that's why I'm an economic justice coordinator.
No, George, please.
Yeah, if I might say a couple of things. One, if you think about it, in terms of Reverend Barber's goal and the Poor People's Campaign goal, in trying to reach 5, or in this case, 6 million people, the entire election in 2020 was turned on about 40,000 votes, not the 8 million plus that ended up coming in the popular vote, but in these critical states. Mm-hmm. So to reach 5 million people in those states, and even if the percentages were small of people who responded in a way that you thought positive, it's quite extraordinary what 8% of that number could do to change the entire election. Mm-hmm. The other thing I have to say is that if I were in the position of a number of the people who are considered, you know, low wealth and low propensity voters, I'd probably be pretty pissed off too. After decades and decades and decades of a lot of promises by a lot of different people that have failed to actually deliver, it's hard. So while I concur entirely about the difference between the MAGA Republicans and their gross tactics and their insensitivity and their lack of compassion, on a lot of levels, all Americans have lacked compassion. And it's, you know, and so we, if we're lucky, if we're fortunate in this election, and we do manage to preserve enough of democracy to keep hope alive and to keep progress moving, we have a lot of work to do.
Well, and what people when they picture a poor person, I don't know exactly what the general, you know, face that comes to mind, but I'm a poor person. I'm a member of the poor population. I wasn't born poor. I didn't grow up poor. I didn't raise my children in a poor place or in a poor way. But I'm a poor person because I divorced. I left an abusive relationship after nearly 30 years. I endured until my kids were older because I didn't have my own money. I wasn't able to afford a good lawyer to get him. I had to take what I got, which was nothing except my freedom. But I'm not poor in spirit. And that's the thing that a lot of other people don't always recognize either, is that there is spirit out there. There is, in spite of decades, generations of trauma and just despicable treatment, there are people out there that still have spirit and are willing to work for better.
Yes. And go ahead, Robert.
No, please, George. No, I was just going to say, unfortunately, while I think many of us, especially many of us within the we community, are hoping for gains on the Democratic side of the ticket, the Democratic Party has not been a party of the poor, of the downtrodden. They've been as guilty in many ways of exploiting the minority groups and the poor, and for not really standing up for our democracy. They might be our best hope at the moment, but our future cannot rely on them, except for maybe a few, like say Bernie Sanders or say AOC. Our freedom has to come from a third source, and that's the movement such as the Poor People's Campaign.
Right, and there are many organizations that are working to change that. Move to Amend and comes to mind, which is another group that I've gotten involved with. It's just, it's time for a change. I mean, according to the pundits, and I listen to a lot of news, the Republican Party is non-recognizable now, and they're not even Republicans. They're just the MAGA crowd or whatever. And so where does that leave people who view Republicanism as their party, conservatism? I consider myself to be very liberal, but what to me that means is that I'm liberal because I will consider other ways. I'm not locked in. And I will also say that you have a right to think what you think, you do. And I'm not going to like you or not like you based on what you think or feel, but I'm going to look for common ground. Even if it's a tiny sliver, I'm going to look for common ground. And that just is what is lost in the two-party system.
What's lost also in our two-party system is a sense of citizen accountability.
Yes.
There are 5 estates in government, the administrative and the congressional and judicial, and then there's the press, which is our 4th estate, and then there's we the people. It's interesting, in some countries, France, for an example, the first estate is we the people. Here we have we the people last. But the fact of the matter is, we stopped doing our job a long time ago. We stopped diligently exercising our rights. We stopped paying attention and providing oversight to the other, especially the
Did we ever really started? I mean,
yes,
when we first started coming over to this country and taking over from the indigenous peoples, were we thinking of, oh, we have to help them too? Or were we coming in to make things the way we wanted them to be, whether they were right or wrong?
Well, there's no doubt that we have a lot of sins to account for. Mm-hmm. And certainly our treatment of the indigenous, our treatment of Black and brown people who we put into enslavement. There's no doubt that in order to regain moral high ground, we have a lot of accountability, a lot of reparation, a lot of apology to make. There's no doubt. But even within the confines of the awkward and imperfect system of government that was created, we were given a variety of rights that we have misused and abused. And so if we're fortunate to maintain ground, even if we don't gain ground, or if we only lose a little bit of ground, we still, if we want to make a difference in our world, each one of us is going to have to stop the consumption, stop the excess, stop all of that, and start thinking about sufficiency, and start thinking about unity, and start thinking about compassion and engagement and mutual support. And if we do that, then maybe there's still enough of the American dream that will survive. And if we don't, then the probability is we are in for one long, hard, tough pull. And not just because of the MAGA Republicans. Because if we lose this election, we, that is, conscious people who want to preserve democracy, whether they're left or right or center or wherever they are in the spectrum, if we don't do that, then humanity, the other species, and our entire habitat becomes at risk. And the pain and suffering that will be inherited if we do not pay attention to the ravages of climate change that are coming are going to make a little bit of inflation or a little bit of poverty seem like blips on the screen.
Are you a parent, may I ask?
No, I'm not.
What would you say? I am a mother. I have 2 children in their 30s, and my older son doesn't say much, but my younger son does. And he's just bereft. And I am too, but I can't show it. I don't know what to say. That's, besides, it's going to be better. We have to make it better. And
I think the best you can do as a parent is hold that vision in your heart and then tell them the truth. And they know already. I talk to young people all of the time, and when I talk to them, they see through bullshit. They see through empty promises. They see through it all because it's their lives that are on the line. It's their planet that's at risk. It's their future. And if we don't stand up as a people and provide them with that, Greta is right, Most of us are spineless. We lack courage, we lack integrity, and we lack the willingness to recognize that we have an obligation to continue for other generations the opportunities that we've had. But none of those things come up in elections. Talk about the price of coffee or the price of whatever the hell it happens to be, and it's all smoke and mirrors. And until we hold our elected officials accountable, do you know they determine their own salaries? They determine their own work hours. They determine their own retirement benefits. And then we wonder why they don't pay attention to us. They set their own standards that measure success, and success.
And we let them.
Success is getting reelected so I can keep eating from the trough.
Yes.
And we've allowed that to happen. So again, if we stay the course and we're successful over the next 2 years, we have to demand some really significant changes. We have to make the people that we elect be accountable, or we ought to throw them out on the behinds.
I'm going to have to keep wearing my headband to keep me inspired.
Yeah. Yes, you probably are. I may get one to keep myself inspired.
It would look great on you.
Oh, well, thank you. So what else, Robert? Anything else you'd like to cover in this time?
Well, just that I think we've touched on something that no matter what the results are of this election, we're going to have to, there's a lot of work that's still going to have to be done. I think we're all aware of that, not only for the present, but for the future of our loved ones, the future of our planet, as you mentioned, George. So I like what you included at the very end of your article. I think you also included a quote from Buckminster Fuller. we are born to be the architects of the future, not its victims. And I think that's a really important sentiment to carry through.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the interesting thing is, if people would actually feel into that phrase and think about what it means, and then think about the fact that they have in their power the capacity to create the future that they want. They don't have to listen to this drivel. They don't have to buy into these either fairy tales or nightmares that are painted by elected officials in an effort to get elected. We can call them for what they are, liars and cheats and manipulators. And we can regain our sovereignty by remembering that we are the fodder, we are the essence that allow them to pull their shenanigans. When we stop listening, when we stop supporting them, when we stop buying products and services that are made by companies who support them, when we start doing sit-ins and work slowdowns and teach-ins and silent, non-violent protests, when we send a signal that we have enough and we're not going to take it anymore, those are the times when we can begin to feel what Bucky meant when he said, we're the architects of the future and not its victims.
Right, because ultimately it's not just about politics, but it's about it is transformational politics.
Yes.
And that's goal to transform our society, our institutions in a way that does reflect the will of the people.
Yeah. And we just have to regain control of the communication systems and put a federal communications agency back to work with truth in advertising and all the rest of it. We have to prevent people like Elon Musk from buying Twitter and turning into a personal negative machine. We have to take Zuckerberg to the cleaners and stop allowing the bullshit that's going on. That doesn't mean we deny free speech, but what it does mean is we promote honest, ethical, moral, responsible communication.
Exactly.
Get our priorities right.
Yep.
Right. Totally agree. So, George, before we say farewell, when is your book coming out? Do you have a date?
It's available as a free PDF, and I will send you that link, and you can share it with people on the podcast. I'm waiting because based on the election, there are a whole series of chapters that I would want to add that give people practical ways to deal with a new American revolution.
Yeah, that's so important. We've been struggling with this, and I think we have reached. I mean, I'm a political scientist by training, and I keep on waiting for a transformational election. And I'm sort of waiting for it to happen until it sort of hit me one day. It's only going to happen if we make it happen. So
yes, and the first thing we have to do is quiet the noise and the insanity that is trying to take possession of us. If your viewers and listeners would like to take a journey, they should investigate what Carl Jung called the totalitarian virus, and what the Algonquin and the Cree and the Ojibwe called Wetiko or Wetiko, W-E-T-I-K-O. They are diseases of the soul and viruses of the mind that currently have taken possession of far too many Americans. And so our first job is to cure the totalitarian virus, to stop the noise, and then to take a hard look at what do we do going forward to actually create a more perfect union.
And join We the World and the Poor People's Campaign.
Completely, yes, please. Go to we.net. So I just want to thank you both. George, thank you. I loved your article. I look forward to reading your book. Jana, you are a constant inspiration, and I'm so proud to work with you and to know you.
Thank you, Robert.
And to thank Angel, who makes all things impossible. And of course, we always think of Rick Ulfik, who's a dear friend and an amazing human being who founded We the World and helps to keep that vision alive.
Our prayers are with you, Rick.
Thank you. And I send Rick our blessings as well. And Jenna, keep up the good work. Keep it up.
I'll keep wearing my hat.
Yeah, as long as we have partners like you, George, we will.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. Have a great evening.
What an honor. Thank you.
We